Travis Miller from Boiler Upload joins us now. Purdue taking on Syracuse this weekend. Purdue now 1-1. Syracuse 2-0 on the year. A game that Purdue kind of has to win. I hate to use the word has to this early in the year. Indiana is in the same exact boat. The Louisville game is a kind of have to win if you have thoughts of reaching that 6-win plateau. Purdue scheduled, it might, if you play it all out, it might be a little easier, but they have Michigan and Ohio State on the schedule as well. So this is just one of those games, with this one being at home, definite. It's an 80% must win, whatever you want to call that, I guess you'd say.
I would say it makes things easier with making the postseason. I think Purdue's got an advantage over Indiana there just by virtue of playing the Big Ten West here in the final season of the Big Ten West. And who knows what games will, I mean, I'm sure next year they'll be adding teams in the middle of the season and changing games for us as the Big Ten expands further west. So, but anyway, I think it's a game that Purdue can win. It'll be an interesting challenge. And I think a victory would make us fans pretty satisfied, just because most of us would have taken a 2-1 run through a pretty tricky non-conference slate. Not terribly challenging. It's not like you're playing Alabama, Georgia, and Clemson in a row, but it's also not like you're playing Indiana State, Ball State, and some other MAC team. So I think it'll be a good game. It'll be a good test for Purdue going into the Big Ten season. And a win, I think, makes a bowl relatively likely given who they've got to face down the road.
Well, we've been talking a lot about prime, but that's been Deion Sanders. But Purdue playing in prime time this week under the lights as Ross-Ade Stadium getting lit for the first time since the renovations, right? Are the renovations complete?
They're in a process right now. The south end zone was completed here in the off season, so they've got the new student section there underneath the scoreboard. The next phase is going to be kind of separating into 2 decks. I think they said that's going to be a very extensive one, and it's one of those pending fundraising and everything situations. So we'll see when and if that happens. I know there's been talks of that for years, but this is the first night game with the new student section, with the south end zone bleachers and everything back in full force. So I think it'll be great. Stadium looks great with the new tunnel. Everything looked good during Fresno's game. And it's actually 2 night games in a row for them because they host Wisconsin next Friday night under the lights there.
That ought to be a fun one. As Purdue enters this final non-conference matchup with, like I said, a 1-1 record, it's going to be a clash with the Syracuse team. But this was a great game last year.
Right.
And so while the participants, there's been a lot of change, obviously a coaching change. There's been a lot of player change, but it still seems like it's right at the same place. I mean, these two teams kind of seem like this is going to be 2 Rams going at it on a hill.
Yeah, and last game was a game that Purdue really gave away in the final minute. They scored a touchdown to go up. I think it was 3 points with 50 some odd seconds to go, and everything kind of fell apart from there. I believe they committed 7 penalties in the last 50 seconds. A couple of unsportsmanlikes, a couple of pass interferences. Syracuse got down the field and scored the game-winning touchdown by completing 1 pass. So
that's Indiana. That's how Indiana beat Michigan State last year, baby.
Well, I'm just talking the final drive, but yeah, it was a lot of self-inflicted wounds. Yeah. And I think Purdue had to kick off from like its 10 after a couple of unsportsmanlike conduct penalties, and then they racked up a few more after Syracuse scored their touchdown. So they had to kick off from like the Purdue 40, or the Syracuse 40. So really a lot went wrong in that final minute, and I think, like that game, it's going to be a close one. Last year's game started slow. It was only 10-9 after 3 quarters, and then they combined for 42 points in the 4th quarter. So I think you could see something like that again on Saturday night.
Well, the big deal, of course, in this game, quarterback play. You've got two good quarterbacks going against each other. But for Purdue, of course, Hudson Card. And there's another difference between, say, Purdue and Indiana. And I've been harping on this about Indiana the whole time, is they didn't have their guy at the beginning of the season. And they're going into this game tonight, or not tonight, but tomorrow, with the Cardinals, and basically his first true start as the guy in Taven Jackson. But Hudson Card has been the guy. He's got 2 games under his belt, a road match under his belt, which that has to help. Now he comes back home. He's going to be in much better position as they enter this game. How are you feeling about his play so far?
I think he's coming along great. And this is a guy that stared down Alabama last year with Texas and nearly beat them. So he had a ton of experience.
And that experience alone right there, playing through that in those types of games, it doesn't get any bigger.
Right. And it's a situation where I think he's coming along well. I think his running ability adds a very nice element to the Purdue offense, one that hasn't been there for a while. I mean, Aiden O'Connell was about as mobile as the Boilermaker statue outside the stadium. And Card had a nice designed run last week that scored the game-winning touchdown. So he's done well. I think he can clean a few things up. He's missed on a few passes, but overall, I can't really complain. He hasn't turned the ball over yet. And nobody's going through a season without throwing an interception, but you get through 2 games without throwing a pick, that's got to build some confidence.
Absolutely. And like I said, they come back home after being on the road last week to Ross-Ade Stadium, which it used to be everybody played 3 non-con home games to get those 3 wins. And both Indiana, they just got out of the series with Louisville. They're just playing this one game now because if you're a Big Ten team that is like Purdue or Indiana, where you're middle of the pack or down below, you don't need to be scheduling a Power 5 non-con team. You need all the help you can get to get that to that 6-win plateau. But at the same time, if you want to be better, you have to schedule better. And you've got to applaud Purdue for the schedule they put in place. Even the very first game, that we knew was not going to be an easy game, and they ended up losing it. But that was not an easy game. Last week was a road game against another Power 5 opponent, and so they have this. That's a pretty damn tough non-con schedule for a middle or below the pack team for anybody.
Yeah, and Purdue's always done that. I mean, for 70 years, they played Notre Dame home and home every year. So, I think they're kind of used to it. And it's been a while since we played Notre Dame every single season, but they're on the schedule the next 5 years after this season. And then, Virginia Tech, this was a leftover road game after we played them in 2015 in West Lafayette. And they're not afraid to challenge themselves. And I kind of like it, honestly. Even the COVID year, 2020, the 3 non-conference games that were lost that year were Memphis, Air Force, and Boston College. And of those 3, Boston College was probably the worst one. It was supposed to be at Boston College, but Memphis, I think, was coming off of a 10 or 11 win season. Air Force was coming off of a 10 or 11 win season. And they were going to challenge Purdue. And it's great to see. Next year, Purdue has their return game at Oregon State. I believe they've got Indiana State on 2 of the next couple of seasons. They've got a return game coming from UConn after they went to UConn in 2021. But they've got Wake Forest, North Carolina, Ole Miss, the back end home and homes with Vanderbilt and TCU coming up. They're not afraid to challenge themselves. And I kind of like it. I think it makes for something unique, and it makes for it's nice to see different teams come through and have those challenges.
Well, and on paper, Purdue, coach-wise, they're set. You've got Ryan Walters as the head coach, who was a defensive strategist, of course, coming over from Illinois with his, what was it called? Not Air Strike. You've got Air Strike, and then you've got Graham Harrell with a quasi-air raid. It's not really the air raid, but but he calls it the airstrike defense. He has not gotten that fully implemented, I guess, yet, but it's coming along, which defense probably takes, I don't know. Usually the offense takes longer to get into place than the defense does. That's one positive thing for Indiana. Their defense has been playing great from the beginning. Where is Purdue as far as the offense and the defense matching each other?
I think they're just about even. Last week, Purdue gave up a record 11 yards rushing, which is the lowest total that they have ever given up on the road. So the run defense did very, very well last week. I think the pass defense still has a ways to go, especially the secondary. But the key is being able to get off the field on third down. Purdue was not able to do that against Fresno State. They struggled in the second half, and Fresno State wore them down. Virginia Tech only converted 2 third downs. And then you look on the other side of the ball, Purdue was much better at converting third downs than they were against Fresno State. So I think the time of possession difference was Fresno had the ball 13 more minutes than Purdue. Last week, Purdue had the ball 16 more minutes than Virginia Tech. So it's a matter of, can you convert those third downs, eventually turn them into points, and keep the defense off the field at times, because they really struggled with Mikey Keene rolling out, finding receivers downfield, and that's going to be a critical aspect for Saturday's game. Garrett Schrader is very, very good about keeping a play alive, and when you have some questions in Purdue's secondary like they do, getting that extra second or two, getting those receivers open is going to be key for Schrader, and I think that's one of the benefits that Syracuse honestly has going into this game.
Okay, so I know what your pick is, but what is your pick as far? What do you think how do you think this game is going to go from a scoring standpoint?
I think it's going to be interesting because we really don't know how good the Syracuse defense is. Yeah, they've only given up 7 points. The one touchdown they gave up was a 75-yard touchdown run on the second or third play of the game last week. So they just kind of got hit on one play, and that's it. But you're playing Western Michigan and Colgate. That's not Fresno State and Virginia Tech. So I think it's going to be interesting. I think it may have a bit of a slow start like last year with the teams kind of testing each other, feeling each other out. And it's probably a game that's going to be in the high 20s, low 30s, I would say. I wouldn't be surprised to see Purdue win something like 31-27. You know, that's kind of my pick right now is 31-27, but we'll see. And an interesting aspect that Purdue has is the special teams has been better. They actually have somewhat of a threat returning punts for the first time in ages. And then you had Tyrone Tracy with the kickoff return against Fresno State. That was the first kickoff return for a touchdown Purdue had in 10 years. And so that is something that can be a factor and kind of change things around. And it'll be interesting to see if they could hit on a big special teams play like that.
So this is a night game. I'm trying to quickly find what's the spread on this game?
I think Syracuse is about a 3-point favorite.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you not surprised by that?
I'm not, just because, there's still a lot of questions about the Purdue defense, and giving up 39 points to Fresno State, and they scored those points relatively easy. That's going to raise a lot of concerns until the secondary can get some stops, especially facing an experienced quarterback in Garrett Schrader. Now, last week was much better, and that was against an experienced quarterback in Grant Wells, but what team is going to show up this week? And if Purdue can get to Schrader, not let him keep plays alive with the defensive line, bottle up the running game, and control the clock like they did last week, that's going to benefit Purdue greatly.